Hey, it's Coach Anson again from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. In Unit 8, lesson number 4, we talked about Hoover's idea of American individualism. What we want to do, of course, is look at what Hoover in his own words. And what we're going to do is look at a primary source in terms of a speech, of course, that was given by Hoover. We'll read that speech to you, and then we'll ask you to kind of reflect in terms of what are some of the meanings, of course, that he puts forth, of course, in that particular speech. What we'll do, of course, is read the speech to you first. This is from Herbert Hoover, and a speech that he made before the Great Depression starts in 1928. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what his mindset was, of course, when the Depression, of course, does happen. He says, and I quote, "You cannot extend the mastery of the government over the daily working life of a people without, at the same time, making it the master of people's souls and thoughts. Free speech does not live many hours after free industry and free commerce die. Every step of bureaucratizing of the business of our country poisons the very roots of liberalism. That is political equality, free speech, free assembly, and equality of opportunity. It is the road not to more liberty, but to less liberty." When you look at that speech, of course, that Hoover makes in 1928, it gives you some great insights in terms of what his ideas will be, of course, when the Great Depression happens. And as if you remember in the last lesson, of course, when we talked about Hoover's American individualism, a lot of those tenets in terms of laissez-faire, government staying out, government doesn't giving people, a leg up or a hand up. So when you think about those thoughts, when you look at Hoover's quote here, now this is before things get bad, and you're going to find that he sticks to those very same types of things. What we're going to do, of course, is, after you read that, of course, along with me, is we're going to go through and we're going to look at answering a few questions and kind of, see if we can get some insights into, to Hoover's frame of mind when the Depression does happen. All right, we're going to answer the questions that we have, of course, in this particular worksheet, and this goes, of course, with that primary source. It says, does Hoover suggest that free industry and free commerce deserve the same reverence as rights guaranteed in the First Amendment? When you look at it, is Hoover saying that free commerce and free industry is just as important as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of petition, all those different things, of course, that are guaranteed to us in the Bill of Rights? It would suggest that maybe he thinks those kind of things are just as important. Let's look at the second question. We'll come back and we'll look at them more in depth in a few seconds. This speech was done at the beginning of the Great Depression in 1928. Do you think that Hoover's point of view might have evolved if he had been reelected in 1932? Well, when you think about it, now once again, this is in October 22nd of 1928, a whole year before the Great Depression, of course, starts. So let's go back and look at these questions again. Let's go back and look at 1 and 2, and we'll get to 3 in a few moments. But what we're going to do is look at question 1. Does Hoover suggest that free industry and free commerce deserve the same reverence as the rights guaranteed in the First Amendment? Well, in my mind, now once again, your interpretation of what he said may be a little bit different from what my interpretation is. But when I look at it, he says, does Hoover suggest that free industry and free commerce deserve the same reverence as the rights guaranteed in the First Amendment? He speaks as if it should be regarded the same. In line 2, and if you go back to line 2, he says, free speech does not live many hours after free industry and free commerce die. So when you think about it that way, he does, in fact, probably give you the impression that it's just as important. He makes no argument or statement for government intervention. He suggests that to intervene would diminish liberty. So when you think about it, I think that there's enough evidence here that we can safely conclude that when you're talking about Hoover's ideas about government, and in terms of looking at government intervention and getting involved in free enterprise and free industry, in his case, free enterprise or free commerce, he would suggest that those things are just as important as the rights guaranteed to us, of course, in the First Amendment. Looking at question number 2, it says, this speech was done at the beginning of the Great Depression in 1928. Do you think that Hoover's point of view might have evolved if he had been reelected in 1932? Well, in looking at it, once again, I can just go by what he says. He says Hoover was a devout Republican, that we know. that lived by laissez-faire and rugged individualism, and none of his actions would suggest that he would have changed his mind. Things got bad from 1929 to 1932, and Hoover was very reluctant to give businesses support. So if he was reluctant to give businesses support, that would tell you that even though things had gotten pretty bad, because they couldn't get much worse than they were in 1931, 1932, but Hoover still stuck to those ideas that he had about American rugged individualism, of course, and laissez-faire. So there's nothing that I see that would suggest in this writing or anything else that he did that would change his mind. The last thing that we want you to do is to take the remainder of the time that we have, and we want you to start writing an essay. So number 3 says, write an essay detailing if Hoover's response to the Great Depression was flawed, or an essay in support of his approach. So take one side or the other, in support of Hoover's idea or not in support of Hoover's idea. And what we want you to do, of course, is use the rubric that will be provided at the end of the unit and construct that particular essay. And once you've done so, print it, turn it into your teacher, and they will evaluate it based on that particular rubric. We hope that you've enjoyed us going through and looking at the primary source on Hoover's speech, and we hope that you were able to go through and reflect and make some judgments about Hoover's idea in handling, of course, the Great Depression. And one of the things that we will say to you is this here: Hoover is widely regarded as one of the worst presidents of the United States of America because of his handling of the Great Depression. Now, that's kind of overshadowed from the standpoint that, prior to him becoming president of the United States of America, he had done some great things in our history, throughout our history, of course. And because of that, we look at what he does during the Great Depression, and because he was just being what he was, which was a Republican that had ideals about the way things should be, he's widely regarded, of course, as one of the most unpopular presidents. But once again, don't take my word for it. Do your own research and draw your own conclusions. And this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. And we'll see you next time.